Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Carrie Burke, your moderator for today's webinar, Assessing Business Operations Risks with Unified Vulnerability Management in ThreadFix 3.0. You may send in questions at any time during the presentation via the Q&A chat feature. We will collect these and address them at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to introduce Dan Cornell, a globally recognized application security expert who holds over 15 years of experience architecting, developing, and securing web-based software systems. As Chief Technology Officer and Principal at Denim Group, he leads the technology team to help Fortune 500 companies and government organizations integrate security throughout the development process. He is also the original creator of ThreadFix. Presenting alongside Dan, we have Kyle Pippin. Kyle has over 15 years of experience in successfully building and delivering enterprise-level software products and projects. As product manager of ThreadFix, Kyle is involved in all aspects of product planning, development, and presentation. He is responsible for ensuring ThreadFix meets or exceeds customer needs and expectations by working directly with clients, project management, and technical leads to facilitate the greatest possible value to customers.
Thanks, Carrie. And thank all of you for attending today. We've been doing a lot of work with ThreadFix leading up to the 3.0 release, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to you all about it. I want to thank Kyle Pippin for being here today. Are you excited, Kyle?
I am very excited.
Very good. Well, both Kyle and I are excited, and hopefully you all are excited as well. Just a little bit of background about Denim Group for anyone who might be less familiar with us. At Denim Group, we are building a world where technology is trusted. So we work with organizations helping them to secure software. And we started doing this in 2001. And we have a background originally as a custom software development shop. We don't do that anymore. I have for quite some time. But from a culture standpoint, that does give us a lot of insight into the challenges that organizations face trying to develop secure software. One interesting thing that came up in the office recently is some of the original work we did on ThreadFix, the normalization and deduplication routines, were actually written in 2009. So we've had about 10 years of ThreadFix, and as you'll see, some of the architectural changes that we've made with the 3.0 release really reflect some important changes that we need to make to see this technology mature and to prepare us for a lot of the things that we've done now and that we're doing in the future. And at Denim Group, in addition to our ThreadFix platform, we also provide professional services, advisory services, and managed services, and we'll talk a little bit about how those are delivered via the ThreadFix platform for organizations that want to take advantage of that. Just a little bit of background about ThreadFix. ThreadFix helps you to create a consolidated view of your applications and the vulnerabilities associated with them. And now, as we'll see, also the associated infrastructure. And so it lets you go and look across your enterprise, across all the teams you have worldwide that are developing software and systems, around all the applications that each of those teams are responsible for, as well as the infrastructure that supports them, and lets you pull in the results of all the different testing activities that you might be undertaking. By pulling all of this data into one central place, it helps you to prioritize the risk decisions based on data. So you get a much more data-centric view into your application and infrastructure vulnerability management program. ThreadFix also allows you to translate these vulnerabilities that you've identified that security teams care about. It lets you translate those to developers and to operations teams and the tools that they're already using. And so you take vulnerabilities that the security teams care about and turn those into software defects or technical backlog that development teams care about so that they can get those vulnerabilities resolved and reduce your risk. But also by doing all of this in one central location, ThreadFix provides access to powerful analytics and metrics. This allows you to take a much more quantitative view of your vulnerability management program and put you in a situation where you can run experiments, where you can see how different things work, how you can evaluate different technologies that you have in place, and use that data-driven knowledge in order to provide for more maturity and to drive more maturity. Some of the things that we've seen with ThreadFix, up to a 44% reduction in the mean time to fix for vulnerabilities. That's great because it reduces your risk exposure. And also tremendous, up to a 5 times in certain cases, increase in the productivity of the application security team. So we've been very excited to work with the ThreadFix platform with a number of organizations to see the way that it allows them to really take the best advantage and make the best use of the limited resources that they have. So if we look at the data flow in the ThreadFix platform, on the left side of the equation, you have all of the different activities or the testing and assurance activities that go into your program. And so with application security testing, if you're doing static analysis with a Fortify or a checkmarks, if you're doing dynamic analysis with an AppScan or a Web Inspect or a burp, if you're doing interactive application security testing with like a contrast, and if you're doing software composition analysis with a dependency check or a Sonatype, all of those results from that application security testing can be loaded into ThreadFix, where they get normalized and deduplicated. In addition, with the 3.0 release, we also allow you to pull in the results of the network security scanning that you're doing. So, for example, with Nessus, with Qualys, with Rapid7. So those results can get pulled in as well, and as we'll see, you can correlate the applications with the infrastructure that drives or supports those applications, providing you with the unified view into the risks that your systems are exposed to. In addition, for mature security programs, you're also likely doing manual testing. Maybe you have third parties that are doing bulk testing for you and providing those results. Those also can be loaded into ThreadFix for management. And similarly with false positive analysis, identifying weaknesses in the testing where you're finding false positives. So all of the assurance and testing activities that you're doing get loaded into ThreadFix, where ThreadFix makes sense of that data, normalizes it, deduplicates it, provides you with one single unified view. This allows you then to reach out to other stakeholders, be that to help inform your web application firewalls, to help inform your GRC program, to let them know of the risks that you're identifying as a result of your application infrastructure testing. It allows you, as we said earlier, to communicate these vulnerabilities that security teams care about, to communicate those to developers and to operations teams in the trouble ticketing or the bug tracking systems that they're already using. And that's, as we'll see, a very important transition to make to help bridge the gap between the security teams that understand the risk and have these concerns, but to communicate those to the teams that actually need to take action in order to see these vulnerabilities resolved. In addition, by having all of this data in one central location, it gives you access to very powerful reporting and analytics so that you can drive into the data to really gain insight into how your program is working. So who benefits from ThreadFix? How do they benefit? The typical consumer, the part of the organization that is typically driving the ThreadFix adoption is the security team. Most specifically the application security team, but also the teams responsible for vulnerability management and for network and infrastructure security. This allows them, ThreadFix allows them to run a much more efficient and effective security program. And as I said, we've seen a significant increase in testing throughput, reduction in finding count. A lot of the things that we do to drive value for the security teams deal with how do we make the most effective use of scarce resources. We don't see a lot of, actually I've never seen a security team that feels like they're overstaffed or that they don't have enough work to do. Every security team I've ever worked with, I've ever come in contact with, feels like they have limited resources and they have to make really tough decisions of what they're going to do and what will be left behind because they didn't have the resources they wanted. So with ThreadFix, we want to drive productivity. We want to help create opportunities for automation so that the security teams can focus on the most valuable tasks, the most high-value tasks. ThreadFix is also valuable for development teams. As I said, this allows you to communicate more effectively with these dev teams, to communicate with them in the tools that they're already using so that they don't have to learn new tools, that you can take advantage, as a security team, you can take advantage of the investment that they've made in their CI/CD pipelines and their defect tracking systems. And this allows development teams to focus on what they're doing and what you need them to be doing, which is fixing vulnerabilities. ThreadFix also provides value to your GRC or your risk management team. And the chief thing that we've seen here is by using ThreadFix and driving this automation and facilitating this communication, a much faster reduction in risk based on much quicker vulnerability remediation times, up to 44% in certain cases, and a reduction in the mean time to fix. And so that's how we see organizations really getting value out of the ThreadFix platform. Again, just to talk a little bit With ThreadFix, it does test result consolidation. By loading the results of all this testing, sending it through our engine, we see up to a 35% reduction in the overall finding count. That saves your security analyst time because they have less data to go through in order to identify the vulnerabilities to be most concerned about. That's supported by 2 patents that we received last year on our hybrid analysis mapping technology to correlate between static and dynamic testing results. And ThreadFix overall provides for this integration and automation across the suite of tools that you're using to drive your security program. From those inputs on the left side, all the different testing and scanning activities, allowing for the deduplication, merging, the correlation, tracking history. This allows you to call out false positives and to do risk triage much more effectively, and then to communicate out to the other systems that you need to communicate with, Jira, ServiceNow, and other things. This provides you this insight within ThreadFix, but also via our API, you can take the data in ThreadFix about your vulnerability management program and pull that up into other systems. And so you can see this view across your entire enterprise. And with ThreadFix, as I mentioned, we're trying to drive the effectiveness and the productivity of security teams. And so we want to take advantage of any automation that's in place. We want to drive new opportunities for automation, again, so that your security team can stay focused on the highest value tasks. They don't get mired in trying to get data in between systems and doing a lot of manual stuff that could easily be automated. A big part of this is the orchestration. As we said also before, we want development teams to have the advantage or to be able to take advantage of security testing to get insight into the security state of the systems in their CI/CD pipelines, just as they are getting advantages from doing unit testing, from doing integration testing in those CI/CD pipelines. We also want to give them a view into security, but we don't want to require them to learn a lot about security tools. And so the ThreadFix platform allows them to drive this testing orchestration from the tool they're already using, often Jenkins for CI/CD pipelines. ThreadFix handles the running of the tools, the merging of the data, and then feeds that back into the bug tracking systems that they're already using. As I said, again, this defect tracker integration is a paradigm shift for a lot of teams. Instead of communicating between security and development teams with PDFs or Excel spreadsheets, instead by communicating into the tools they're already using, that allows you as a security team to take advantage of the investment that they've made selecting, procuring, deploying, configuring all of these systems, as well as the processes and the meeting tempo that they have around those systems. And so by being able to get into the workflow and the tools they're already using, ThreadFix allows you to get a lot more leverage and to take friction out of the remediation process. Another thing that we did with the ThreadFix platform, starting with 2.7, continuing into 3.0, is we allow you to outsource testing, to outsource portions of your application testing program to Denim Group via the ThreadFix platform. And so integrated into the ThreadFix platform is now the ability to reach out and to assign testing tasks to Denim Group for us to run our quick check assessments or our full assessments, and to have those results delivered directly to you in the ThreadFix platform. And so what this provides is the capability to make both strategic and tactical decisions about your program. Again, in any organization, you're going to have a limited set of resources. And so a question that you're probably asking yourself is, with these limited in-house resources, what capabilities do we want to have in-house? And what things do we want to outsource? In a lot of cases, testing, or at least certain testing activities, are the easiest thing to outsource, and you can do that directly via the ThreadFix platform. ThreadFix also allows you to answer questions tactically. If you need additional capacity to get through and hit testing milestones, you can also have that delivered via the ThreadFix platform. And so with ThreadFix, we want to give you the flexibility to look at your program, to understand the resources you have available, and to be able to make those both strategic and tactical decisions to say, this is what I want to do in-house, and this is the stuff that I just want to have done for me. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kyle, and he's going to go through a demonstration of ThreadFix and the typical use case that we see organizations using it for. First, he's going to look at the capabilities that ThreadFix has had for a while, the kind of classic view of ThreadFix and its capabilities, and then he's going to go through the new capabilities that have been added in 3.0 that provide that network and infrastructure vulnerability management, the correlation between network assets and the applications they're supporting, and that unified vulnerability management. Take it away, Kyle.
Terrific. Thank you, Dan. And as he mentioned, look, we're going to do a quick overview of what ThreadFix's application-centric vulnerability management is. Many of the people on this webinar are very familiar with ThreadFix and have been using it in some cases for many years. And so I don't want to dwell on that too long. I just kind of want to give an overview for the folks that may be new and then spend most of our time talking about what we've been building in 3.0. The first screen I'm going to click over to here is our portfolio view. This portfolio view, hopefully everyone can see my screen, is new to 2.7, but it's very similar to what we had before with the Teams view. In fact, the Teams view is a component of that portfolio view, as you can see here. This is where you can see a list of your applications organized by the teams that you've created. And those teams can be organized however you would like. They're just collections of applications, but they're useful for viewing reporting information. If you wanted to view a holistic breakdown of your vulnerability data based on a collection of apps by team, you can do that. Also really useful for access control if you just want to give users specific permissions at the scope of a team. That would be one benefit of organizing your teams one way or another. The information provided here gives you a high-level overview of what's happening with a given application in that team, and you can expand any of these to look at additional information about the application, like metadata. You can see here there's a service request that's been submitted for this particular application, and so in this case, the services integration that Dan alluded to earlier has been exploited, and Denim Group is presumably hard at work assessing that particular application. But you'll notice this top drop-down here is new, and it gives you a couple of different ways to look at your applications lists. This relative risks breakdown is one example, and something that is new to 2.7. If you choose to enable this feature, ThreadFix will take a lot of the information that we have, not just from the scan data that we have, but also the metadata, the information about when a scan was done, how many vulnerabilities, et cetera, have been open in the system, how long since you've done an assessment. All of that will roll into how we calculate risk within your platform, and we will bundle those together to show you which applications we believe have the greatest risk to your organization. So you can see that view here. We can look at what are the highest risk applications as a single view. We can look at what the next category down of application risks. But this is a new page. This is also a page that will be evolving. Right now, this is just taking a look at application-centric data. With the new 3.0 infrastructure vulnerability management capabilities that we brought on board, we'll be expanding that to include a greater contextual awareness of where your application, where your vulnerabilities really exist. So this is just the beginning, but it's our first kind of jump into giving you some really actionable risk data. Another view that we have here is on the applications list. As opposed to viewing your applications bundled by teams, you can view your applications as a full list together and sort them and organize them to see, what are they by risk, what are they by number of critical vulnerabilities. You can see what your policy statuses are, or if you want to see get an idea from your applications list, like when is the last time I've run scans, for example. Here's a collection of applications that have never received any scan data. The only reason they show up as low risk in this example is because they haven't received any information that makes us feel like they are a greater risk. There's no metadata associated with those apps that indicate that these are public facing or contain personally identifiable information or whatever. But it is still a relevant piece of data that they have not yet been scanned. So we'll move real quickly back to the Teams view, and then I think we should move over to take a look at an application in more detail. Again, a lot of this is going to be reviewed for folks, but within ThreadFix, when you have vulnerability data loaded up into ThreadFix, for applications, it's always around the concept of an application to the view of our system. And so that can be a microservice, it can be a utility, or it can be an entire application. However you want to run your scanning program, that's how we would recommend you build that entity set within ThreadFix. But in this case, Bodget is an open source application that is full of vulnerabilities. We demo it all the time because it's got lots of cool problems. And so we'll take a look at that here. Not a lot's different. Folks that are really comfortable with ThreadFix will recognize that our entire menu system has been updated, so it looks a little bit more consistent and cohesive with what we've done in 3.0, and I'm very excited to show you guys that in a few minutes. But let's run through one of the new things that we have here on the app side of the house. which is the ability to associate or provide metadata about your application that describes where it's hosted. And so I'm going to make a quick edit to this application. I'm just going to scroll down here and throw in this case, an IP address. You can remember that IP address. It'll come up later. 1Password's annoying. It'll come up again later in the demo. But for now, I just want to say, hey, this application lives on that particular piece of hardware. I could have thrown 5 different IP addresses in there if it was hosted in a load balance scenario, whatever makes sense. But we'll start with that and move forward. The next thing that we want to take a look at is the list of vulnerabilities that we have within an application. So I'm going to look at all the SQL injection vulns that we have. You can see that many different scanners actually identified those. If we look at the cross-site scripting vuln list, you can see in the case of this /search.jsp vulnerability, the scanning tools that I ran against this application all were able to identify this vulnerability in a way that we were able to automatically merge and deduplicate. And a lot of that, you can see there's a series of static tools here. There's also a series of dynamic tools. The way that we're able to merge the static and dynamic vulnerabilities kind of calls back to that 2 patents that Dan referenced earlier. We were awarded for that analysis engine that was written specifically for that capability. There's a lot of other information that you can see here, and I don't want to spend a bunch of time on it. We're not going to go into a deep dive of all the things we can do on the app side of the house, but you can see there's issue tags identifying when you created a defect for your development team. Again, Dan referenced that capability earlier. You can see in some cases there's a vulnerability marked top priority. That's a tag that you can apply or exploited. And you can see also where there are shared vulnerabilities, which is using another patent that we had been awarded around our hotspot detection, identifying where vulnerabilities in certain applications are very likely to are caused by source code that's been shared between multiple disparate applications, but is a single piece of source code that has a vulnerability in it. And so that's another very interesting capability, and in a separate conversation we can go into much more depth about that, but for now I just kind of want to overview what's there. Let's look a little bit at some of the pivoting or the filtering capabilities that we have within ThreadFix to allow you to view this data in different ways for a given application. So right now we're pivoted by severity and CWE, but you can see here we can change that to be by severity and then maybe by the path. Looking at what is on the login.jsp so I can figure out which vulnerabilities I want to tackle first, or maybe just assign to a given developer group or team that's working on that page. Or if I want to see what's organized by scanner, I can see, okay, well, let me see all the things that Contrast identified. You can see that it's not just Contrast. There are other findings merged with Contrast, but all of the findings in that list were at least found by Contrast. The other thing that we want to look at here is filtering capabilities that you gain or insight that you gain for filtering by virtue of the fact that you're leveraging the defect tracker integration. So again, we'll look at these issues here. You can see that there's some in open status, some in resolved status. Our defect tracker filters allow us to look at all the vulnerabilities based on whether or not we've created a defect, or in this case, let's take a look at all of the vulnerabilities that have been identified by the development team as being resolved, but have not yet been validated by a scan upload. These are all defects in JIRA that have a status that mean complete, and this will give you a quick view of where you may need to maybe upload a new scan assessment to identify where those developer assertions are true or false. Another thing that we can filter on is a combination of any of these criteria here on the side to paint a more specific picture. So if we wanted to see just all the critical and highs based on maybe a time frame, I mean, maybe we want to see all the criticals and highs that were introduced within more than, say, 30 days ago, or let's say more than 90 days ago. We take a look at that organized by a different pivot. Let's say we organize these vulnerabilities by the path that they're in, and then we can get a very quick breakdown of specifically the critical and high vulnerabilities organized by path that have been known to us for more than 90 days. This is another useful way of breaking this data down within the application. So anyway, quick review for most folks, some interesting capabilities for new folks. Let's talk about how we get the scan data into ThreadFix. The most interesting way, and certainly the way that we've carried over into the network side of the house is through our remote providers. This is an API-based integration with these scanning tools, and for this app it was these 3, but let's look at all the remote providers that we support. Any of the scanning tools that you see in this list here are scanners that we have an API-based integration with. And if you establish a connection with any one of these scanners, and I have several you can see here in the background, let's look at Contrast. We've got this list of applications Contrast has under management, or Checkmarks has this list of applications. All of them mapped to apps in ThreadFix, and then you can set up schedules to automatically pull the latest vulnerability data from those scanners on any type of a rhythm that makes sense for your program. The remote provider integration is certainly, I think, the most user-friendly integration, but ThreadFix has over 40 integration points beyond just what you see here, where we support file outputs from scanning tools. And the 3 network scanners that we're initially launching 3.0 with all support the file outputs as well as an API-based integration to provide you the greatest amount of flexibility. Additionally, you can get scan data into ThreadFix via automation from those scan files simply by leveraging our API. In fact, everything that we've looked at so far and everything we're going to look at in this demo through the UI's capabilities are all supported through our API. The intent being that a lot of our users, especially at scale, especially in enterprises, really don't have an interest in clicking around the app for every action they need to take. They need to be plugged into a larger, sometimes DevSecOps pipeline, sometimes just part of their own workflows, and they don't want to be going through and managing things manually. So the UI is fun to demo, but most of our users, especially at large scales, are leveraging predominantly our API to get this data in and then often to pull reporting information back out. But let me pass it back over to Dan to talk a little bit about some of the new capabilities that we built in 3.0 and why.
Thanks, Kyle. As I talked about, probably the biggest change that users are going to notice in ThreadFix 3.0 is our addition of infrastructure vulnerability management capabilities as kind of a first-class object. Always, the reason that we built ThreadFix originally is that organizations developing applications are exposed to risk because of their applications. You're concerned about SQL injection, cross-site scripting, authorization issues, and so on and so forth. And that's very much been our focus. But if you look at these applications, they're all supported to some degree by infrastructure. They run on servers, they run on routers, they run on network load balancers. There's a whole set of infrastructure that goes into making sure that these applications run. And this infrastructure also exposes organizations to risk. You may have open ports, SSH misconfigured, send mail running, whatever it might be. And so with ThreadFix 3.0, we treat network and infrastructure assets as first-class items. Some folks who are longtime users of ThreadFix may remember or may know earlier you could do some integration. You could upload Nessus files and do a little bit of tracking of network and infrastructure stuff, but it was all done exclusively through an application-centric asset management view. And it was, candidly, it was a little goofy. It worked for certain use cases, which is great, but with ThreadFix 3.0, as we'll see, this has been fully built out and provides this unified vulnerability management. So ThreadFix 3.0 allows you to define networks. What are the different sets of networks that are supporting your various applications? And which network may be supporting multiple applications, or an application may get support from multiple networks, but it lets you lay out these networks and import scanning results. Initially, we have support for Tenable Nessus, Qualys, and Rapid7's Insight VM, with some more planned for down the road. And what I think is most important and most interesting about this is it allows you to correlate the applications with the infrastructure that supports them. And so that provides you with a unified view into your risks from vulnerabilities at both levels. And as Kyle demonstrated earlier, this can be done via the user interface to go in and say, this application, here's the IP or whatever it is for the web server that is running this. You can also do this via the API. And so the scenario that we're working most frequently with the organizations, the early adopters, is taking their configuration management database or wherever they have some structured information about how applications are correlated to infrastructure and using that to replicate into the ThreadFix environment. And so what that provides you with is that total view of, for this application, what's my total risk exposure? So that puts you in a situation where you can start to ask questions to say, hey, we're concerned about the business process of onboarding new customers, right? And that business process uses this web-based application. It's supported by these 3 microservices, and for each of those chunks or each of those applications, they are run by these, in turn by these pieces of infrastructure. And so that allows you, from a risk management level, to go in and ask questions of ThreadFix to say, I'm concerned about the risk to the business process of onboarding new customers. Show me the vulnerabilities that are exposing us to risk for the different applications that make up and support that business process, as well as for all the infrastructure that in turn supports and drives those applications. And so what we want to do is put you in a position where, by tracking vulnerabilities at multiple levels in the stack, it allows you to answer a much more completely, a more sophisticated set of questions about how your programs are exposing you to risk. Also, as a bonus for ThreadFix 3.0, and I'm particularly excited about this, is we have a new user interface and user experience. That's something that I have a soft place in my heart for the more traditional ThreadFix user interface, mostly because I had a role in designing it. I have received feedback from multiple points that maybe my eye in this area is not the best, and so for the last year we've had a person on board who is helping us to revamp the user interface and the user experience, and so that's something that I'm really excited about. It modernizes the look and feel, which is great, but also from a user experience standpoint provides a much better way to interact with the system. And so I'm very excited to get that out in front of folks. You'll see that for implemented across all of the new network and infrastructure components for parts of the application components, and what you'll also see as point releases and time goes by, that will become ubiquitous across the platform. And so very excited. Now let's turn this over to Kyle to look to do a deeper dive into the new capabilities in 3.0 and to see how those relate to all of the ThreadFix stuff that you're used to.
Terrific. Thank you, Dan. And after that great lead up to our new user interface, let's look at the first new screen for ThreadFix 3.0, which is actually quite underwhelming. I'm on the network screen, and this is an empty instance that currently has no networks. So let's run through what it looks like to start putting together an asset vulnerability or an infrastructure vulnerability management program within the new ThreadFix UI. First, I'm going to go and create some networks here just to allow me to build some of that intelligence around the vulnerability data that I'm importing. Again, we're showing this all through the UI. Actually, let me make this a bit more generic. 192.0.0.0. We're just going to create some broad networks to make sure we capture lots of asset data so it looks interesting. There's different types of networks. I'm just going to make these static, and then I'll save a couple more of these. But you can see there's no information in the system yet. Let me go back to network. I'll go ahead and add a couple more. Sorry, bear with me. We'll also make this one static and say one more for, say, workstations. All right. So now that we've got something defined that kind of just generally describes it, now you can use CIDR ranges, you can do just an IP address to an IP address, you can list IP addresses if you want. In most cases, we expect that users would put together networks by automation, just by feeding it from, say, an internal CMDB, the same way that we would expect them to populate the asset and application correlated data. But again, we certainly will let you do it through the UI if you are so inclined. And now let's put together or upload some scan data for these new networks. So the first, I'm just basically going to upload one of each of the scanners that we integrate with. I mentioned before that this is all API-based integration in the final GA release. Right now I'm just showcasing the file-based upload, but of course this will all be automatable. You'll see immediately we created a ton of assets based off those scans that we uploaded. The way that and Dan will go into a little bit more of this here in just a second, but the way that the architecture is structured enables us to go through and very quickly identify what assets are being described by the scan data and automatically populate your system with that asset topography, and then to next go in and start burning through the vulnerabilities reported by those scans and reporting their data for you here. So you can see we've got the first 2 scans have been processed, and now we're just waiting on the Insight VM scan to be processed. And there you go. Once that's done, we've got information about the vulnerabilities, we've got the asset list, and we're ready to start looking at what we can do with this data. But before we do that, let me kick it back over to Dan real quick. I'm going to actually upload about 6 or so more scans to get a bit of a trend graph going in our demo, and I'll hand it back over to Dan while I do that.
Thanks, Kyle. Kyle mentioned some architectural changes, and so again, we're talking a lot about the user-facing, the new capabilities, the unified vulnerability management, the network and infrastructure support. We've also, under the hood, made a lot of changes as well. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, the ThreadFix application or the ThreadFix platform has been around for about 10 years. And for those 10 years, architecturally, it has been a pretty standard, straightforward, monolithic Java Spring Hibernate web application, which is great, except, again, over time, what we've seen is with scalability requirements, with flexibility requirements, as well as just modernization, times have changed. And so with 3.0, the ThreadFix platform now has a microservices-based architecture, and we've shifted to a stream-based processing for data ingestion that sits on top of Kafka. We've shifted the reporting to work off Elasticsearch-based reporting, and this makes it it gives you much more powerful capabilities and gives you a lot more flexibility for tuning and scaling your ThreadFix deployment. If you are operating in a lower load environment, again, you can deploy ThreadFix in a fairly straightforward way. But if you find that you have if you have to ingest large data files, or if you have to ingest many small data files, or if you have to ingest many large data files quickly, what you have the ability to do is tune the number of consumer services that you have in your ThreadFix deployment that allows you to chew through that stream-based data ingestion much more quickly. And so for large deployment, if you have esoteric, or not even esoteric, if you just have high volume needs for the size of data being ingested or the speed at which you need to go through the ingestion of new results, ThreadFix 3 gives you a much greater capability to say, in this environment, we're going to spin up 6 more consumers so that we can get through these files a lot more quickly, or so that we can provide a better service level to our customers that are, to your internal customers that are expecting certain turnaround times. And so that's something that we're very excited about. We've seen some really impressive results from that. And again, this gives folks, especially in larger deployments or deployments that have kind of extreme performance characteristics that are needed, a lot more flexibility. In addition, the new architecture is all containerized. That makes it easier to install and easier to maintain. A complaint that we've heard, or some feedback, let's just say feedback that we've heard, which is totally fair feedback, has been around the maintaining your ThreadFix deployment to go from version 2.7 point whatever to the next version, making sure that the database gets upgraded in conjunction with the application. Totally fair, and we've heard, and with the way that we've done this containerized deployment, we've got a container that wakes up, checks around to see, well, what version of ThreadFix was on, what version of ThreadFix do I need to be on, and it sits on top of some technologies like Flyway and whatnot to help automatically roll databases forward, and so on and so forth. And so what we're trying to do is to make it a lot easier for organizations to tune their ThreadFix deployments to meet their performance characteristics that are required, as well as to manage and maintain. We want people to be able, again, to focus their limited resources where they are going to be doing the highest value and most important tasks, So that was one of the important factors that led into a lot of the architectural changes that we made with ThreadFix 3.0. And again, I don't necessarily want to dive too deep into that on this webinar at the current time, but feel free to ask questions if you have, or reach out and we can go into more detail about these things. Now I'll turn it over to Kyle to go through and look through more of ThreadFix 3.0.
All right. Thank you very much. And we have a bunch more data in the system now, and this is our new dashboard. This dashboard is specific to infrastructure vulnerabilities, and these are just the initial reports that we have built for the first GA release. However, there's so much about this architecture that we don't really have time to go into right now, but I am super excited about. One of the things that is incredibly compelling about it is the ability to customize what we have built through external third-party plugins that can be written. That would include things that can be done on replacing the dashboard reports with things that you are interested in seeing. We'll be bringing additional options available to market post initial GA launch. And that list will grow. The customization of these reports will be something that you can do through filtering. And then the addition of reporting that you may find more specifically interesting to your organization is another capability that we kind of build into this new architecture, and we'll be expanding as ThreadFix 3.0 becomes ThreadFix 3.1, becomes ThreadFix, into the future. Another important thing to clarify about what Dan had mentioned regarding that stream-based processing that we did that in part because we knew ThreadFix needed an architectural overhaul. It had been some years. We also did it because we knew with infrastructure vulnerabilities, there is a great deal of data volume expectation increase over what you get from applications. I mean, in many enterprise organizations, kind of the general range we were seeing is anywhere between 10 and 100x the number of vulnerabilities that they need to process on a daily basis from infrastructure than what they have to do from application. And so we knew we needed a broader architecture to support that, as a scaling and a truly multi-threaded architecture that could support that. And so that's what we built. Initially, it will be in 3.0 for the infrastructure vulnerabilities, and then as we march towards the third quarter, fourth quarter of this year, expanding that to support the application vulnerability ingestion as well. So anyway, as we continue to move that direction, the dashboards will start to get more unified. The vulnerability data that you view on here will start to cross your infrastructure and application portfolios to give you a bit more of a high-level overview, and all of that is something that we're excited to bring in as part of that new architecture. You can see on what we have here is just a trending graph showing you vulnerabilities that have been uploaded from the scans that I've provided, operating system breakdown for your environment, how many vulnerabilities have been introduced in the past time frame, and et cetera, what your most vulnerable networks are, most vulnerable hosts, which CVEs are most prevalent within the data that we've uploaded. And if we go back and look at our networks that we had created, we can see where we can see where the vulnerabilities that we uploaded actually populated information into our specific networks. And let's pick one to do a bit of a deeper dive into and see what that specific network information is based on the scans that we uploaded. So I'm gonna pick on our external servers here. You can see this is a list of the assets that series of scans brought in, and we can filter on those. Let's say for this particular network, I just want to see my Windows servers, for example, if I spell it right. And here are all the Windows servers that are on this network, and let's dive into one of those and see what that particular asset has available to us. And so the filtering on a given list of vulnerabilities can be based on severity. You can look for vulnerabilities based on a port. In this case, let's just say 445. You can add a series of ports to these if you wanted to get the culmination of a series of vulnerabilities across certain ports. And you can click in and see additional information that is provided by the scanning tool about that particular vulnerability. One of the things that I'd like to mention is just the difference in how the filtering works here versus how it worked in the application gives a lot of additional flexibility to create and/or relationships with the filters that you provide. So, for example, I just did a filter for 445. I could have done 445, comma 3389, and that would have been an OR relationship, or I could have created another port filter line item, which would have been an AND relationship, to give you a little bit more flexibility in how you slice that data up, which is, I think, a nice evolution of how we manage the reporting. However, if you remember back when I was playing with Budget, I gave that thing an IP address. So let me go see if I can't find a server that matches that IP address. I'm going to filter on my network for that IP, still in my clipboard, and pull back that specific machine. Now, even though the infrastructure data didn't exist at the time I did that, I didn't know about that asset, ThreadFix rather, didn't know about that asset at the time I associated that data. When I ingested the scan results, it automatically correlated that with the budget application based on the information I'd already provided ThreadFix about the application. So as you upload your infrastructure data, if you have already populated that metadata about your app set, we start tying that stuff together for you automatically and drawing that correlation. So you can see for this particular asset, we are making you aware that there is an application that we know about, we have data on. You can even click on that link and get to the application data that we were looking at earlier. But the other capability that gives us is to start giving you a unified reporting across the context of an application based on the infrastructure that it's running on. So you can see the application vulnerabilities that we have on budget here broken down, but you can see those right next to the infrastructure vulnerability data for the asset that it's running on. And so that's really like, this is just the first view, the first visualization that we're providing to give you that capability. This is something that we're going to specifically be focused on, 3.01, 3.02, as we iterate our monthly releases off of the 3.0 launch. One of the things we're going to be specifically focused on is expanding the kinds of questions you can ask the data that you've now brought into a single system. And so with that, I'll pass it back to Dan to kind of take us home. And thank you guys for watching that part of the demo.
Thanks, Kyle. And so to summarize what we've done with ThreadFix 3.0, with the ThreadFix platform for the 3.0 release, we've added the network and infrastructure support as well as the ability to correlate those network and infrastructure assets to application assets. And that gives you the ability to have unified vulnerability management. So across both the network and infrastructure as well as the applications they support, that gives you the ability to have insights across those domains and to drive the resolution across those domains. We also talked a little bit about the embedded outsource testing that is available via the ThreadFix platform. That puts you in situations where you can make those both strategic and tactical decisions about your security program. What are the things that you want to do in-house? What are the things that you simply want to outsource? And how do you meet the capacity needs that you have to have in order to meet your goals? And also with ThreadFix 3.0, the new architecture provides for hopefully a much lower total cost of ownership, easier installation, easier maintenance, and easier scaling for your particular performance characteristics. All right. Well, thanks to everybody for going through this discussion with us here. Now I want to open up the floor for any questions that we might have. Let's see. Kyle had mentioned something about the created static networks. Could you talk a little more about that? Kyle, could you talk a little more about static versus dynamic networks?
Yes, absolutely. So what you saw in the demo, I created a series of static networks. What we really mean by that, or what we are supporting with that, is folks who run infrastructure vulnerability scans against assets that may always have the same IP address, or folks that may be running scans against assets that maybe it's in a container environment where you're standing up and shutting down servers all the time. The IP addresses may change 50 times a month. You don't want to try and correlate your data based on that IP address. You need to do it based on the host or the machine. And so the definition of a network as being static or dynamic gives ThreadFix the information it needs, so as you upload subsequent scans for a given series of IP addresses or hosts, we're able to associate future vulnerability information with the appropriate entity within ThreadFix. In fact, if you had sharp eyes, you probably also would have noticed there's an ignore section in there, and that's just to give our users the flexibility of saying, yeah, I get scan data from our infrastructure team, but from a vulnerability management perspective, there's an entire swath of IP ranges that we do not care about. We're not going to manage it. We're not going to deal with it. We don't have to patch it. We don't have to look at it. So that gives you the option to just kind of keep those out of your data, keep your data a bit cleaner. But those are the network types that we are launching with initially.
Excellent. Next question, is this being recorded for future replay? Yes, this is being recorded and will be posted out to the web, and everybody, both who attended and folks who said they would attend but couldn't make it, will get an email. And so, and also if you have colleagues that you wanted to pass this information along to, yes, this will be recorded and available for consumption later on. We'll get that email out to you. It usually takes us, I want to say, about a day in order to do whatever post-processing video nonsense that has to happen. But yeah, shortly that should be available to folks. Another question. How does the pricing work? Yeah, so the pricing for ThreadFix 3.0 works very similar to the way that pricing has traditionally worked for ThreadFix, and so it has traditionally been an annual subscription based on the number of application assets that you have under management. And obviously as the number of applications under management goes up, the per application rate goes down. Similarly, for ThreadFix 3.0, the licensing for the network capabilities is based on the number of network and infrastructure assets, so IPs and host names that you want to manage, and in a similar way. And so basically what you do is you'd say, well, I have X number of applications and Y number of network and infrastructure assets that I want to manage. Then that goes into a little matrix and comes out with how the subscription is priced for that. Let's see, any other questions that we have here? Anything that's from the Q&A? Anything from the chat?
Pull that up. No.
Very good. Excellent. Well, thank you all for attending. Really appreciated everybody spending. Oh, wait. Wait a minute. Let's see. So, got the questions. Here we go. Yeah, okay. Does it have support for filter of infrastructure vulnerabilities using CVSS score?
So yes, I didn't showcase that, but the filtering does have a CVSS score filter where you can provide either a range, like I just want to see everything over 7.5, or you can provide a specific score to show me everything that has score X. The infrastructure vulnerability data that contains the CVSS score comes directly from the scanners that we integrate with. So initially, the only CVSS scoring that we're going to be providing reporting around is based on specifically those individual vulnerabilities CVSS scores. However, it's worth noting that many scanners provide multiple CVSS scores per vulnerability, and sometimes that's because it's providing, like a 2.x CVSS score or a 3.0 CVSS score. Other times it's because it's providing the base score and its substituent, like the scores that make up that base score, identifying how long it's been out or susceptibility to exploit, whatever. Those pieces of data are all going to be captured and maintained in their own discrete fields. But the filter set that we are launching with is just going to allow you to filter off of the newest CVSS base score associated with that vulnerability. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Okay, does it also have support for finding if any infrastructure vulnerabilities with a high severity or CVSS score has been open for a long time, for example, more than 30 days? Also, are there email notifications associated with that?
Yeah, and to answer that one, initially you'll be able to run filters to get that specific question answered, like which of a CVSS score range has been known for more than a particular period of time. The initial like MVPGA that we're releasing isn't going to have notifications built in on the infrastructure stuff yet, but it is on our very short list of things. Like my primary goal is to get the capabilities you guys just saw to market, start getting feedback, and then starting to direct our development resources into growing that capability where it's most interesting soonest. I strongly suspect that the notification automation capabilities around the data that we're pulling in for infrastructure is certainly going to be on that short list. So we'll be expanding that direction shortly, but the filtering is already going to be there.
Excellent. Let's see. I think that's it. Yeah, talked about support for filtering. Liking the new UI, U capabilities UI. Well, thank you very much. I wish I could claim credit for the UI. I guess where I can claim credit for the UI is by
stopped contributing.
Is that I stopped contributing. So, and in this case, the cessation of my contributions are certainly a net positive.
All right, we've got one more question incoming, and we're almost out of time. We've got about 1 minute, but yeah, please ask if there's any more questions, and we'll...
Somebody's typing. There we go.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
So the licensing is entirely based on your usage. If you have no intention of using infrastructure, you do not need to pay for it. Now, we will be shipping ThreadFix 3.0 application vuln management with some number of infrastructure vulnerability capabilities like enabled for free, if you want to think of it that way. We want to make sure people can play with that. So there's a number of assets you'll be able to upload data for, and in order to just kind of get an idea of what that would let you do. Maybe start correlating some applications with those pieces of infrastructure just to get an idea of where the value could be. Inversely, if for whatever reason you wanted to not use our application capabilities whatsoever and just cared about our infrastructure capabilities, that is also technically possible. We aren't going to require you to purchase anything you don't want. So yeah, those two metrics around our pricing matrix are entirely based on your needs. And that's it, and it's perfect on time, I think. So yeah, thank you guys very much for your participation. Dan, anything else?
Not that I can think of. If you're interested in ThreadFix 3.0, please let us know, and we can get you set up to run in your environment to get it to make sure how it meets your needs. And that is the question here about the timeline for GA. We have a couple groups that are going through proofs of concept right now, and the actual final bit should ship here
momentarily.
Here shortly. So
yeah, any interest in getting this in your environment so that you can play with it and give us feedback and start seeing some value, please just let us know. We'll schedule a POC and start getting this out in your environment. So cool.
Very well. Thank you all for attending. If you have additional questions, please just feel free to reach out. You can go to you can email Kyle or I, or go to threadfix.it and submit a contact or a question form there. Looking forward to talking to folks about this, and hope everybody has a great day. Thanks.